They don't want what we know out there.
How a person can go from really almost nothing to becoming a millionaire by owning rental properties.
He would always buy these flip houses, and I just remember thinking, this guy is crazy. Why would he buy that house?
In the past decade, there's been a huge surge in the peer-to-peer short-term rental market.
Become an insider. So you have to know the rules before you get in the game.
Every second counts. So make every second count.
Welcome to the Real Estate Jam. Whether you're just beginning or the best of the best, we're glad you're here. We will share successes, failures, and strategies for the action-taking real estate investor. And now to your hosts, JD and Melissa.
Welcome to the Real Estate Jam podcast. I'm JD with my wonderful co-host.
Me. Hey,
Melissa.
JD.
Melissa, how are you?
It's fantastic. I'm super excited about today's episode.
Yeah, me too. I think it's very fitting for all real estate investors and us specifically. It's going to be a great show. And I think this is a super important topic that's maybe not on the sexy side of real estate, but it's definitely on one of the more important pieces. We got Scott Royal Smith. He's the fearless leader of Royal Legal Solutions. They're an asset protection firm, kind of a one-stop shop for all of your legal protections and business that he'll get into explaining all of that. He's an entrepreneur, real estate investor himself, which I think is super important when you're dealing with real estate lawyers. If you got a real estate lawyer that's not a investor, there might be a problem there. So I'm super excited to have you on the show today, Scott.
Scott, I think it's sexy.
Well, you're going to make me blush.
I know, right?
On camera. But I think you're actually right. I mean, if I wasn't an attorney, I would just go be like a male model. That's probably what my mom says. I should have done stat, But I was like, just went to law school like every other schmuck, could have had a famous Zoolander career.
Give me your blue steel. That's awesome.
Look, I know, baby. That's why I walk around. That's my resting face. Yeah,
perfect. For anybody that's not watching the video, he's got the perfect blue steel look. And we're moving. All right. So, Scott, give us a little bit of your backstory for those of our listeners that don't know who you are. Can you give us a rundown real quick, and then we'll I'm sure, like I said, but before we started recording, I got a ton of legal questions that I'm sure we'll be able to get into. So why should our audience listen to you, and kind of what's your background?
Well, I think the major thing is like I've just walked the journey, right? That a lot of the clients that I help in their audience is trying to walk, right? Which is I want to build financial freedom. And I think the way that I can do that is through real estate. And the reason I like real estate is because I believe it's a safe asset class and can kick me off passive income to rental income, right? That's the way I built my financial freedom. I started actually when I was in law school. I built a transmission and auto repair shop. Bought it for the back taxes, and then rebuilt the business, rebuilt the building, and flipped it to graduate from law school without any debt. And that's what got me started in real estate. I was so stoked on that I continued to work in litigation after I got out of law school, suing insurance companies. Turns out those guys are great at collecting premiums, even better at denying coverage.
Sure.
So we were suing the pants off of them. And I was just taking the money that, I was making from my law job and turning it into more real estate until I was making more money doing real estate than I was doing law. And so I just quit law and just did real estate full time. What I ran into is that a lot of people had a lot of questions for me, which was around like, hey, Scott, how are you doing your asset protection and your estate planning, and your tax and your insurance? And like, what kinds of syndications and funds are you doing when you can't find the right real estate deals that are available, right? And so where else are you parking money? And so I was just kind of helping people in the meetup groups talk, especially as it came into asset protection, which I know we're focused on here today, but kind of counseling everything about like, here's how the full system and the full game like has to work. And here's how you have to scale at different points. And what, do you need a single LLC or multiple LLCs or a series LLC, or, what are the different considerations? Because depending on where they're at with their journey, it was a different recommendation, right? Sure. Because it was what was appropriate for where they're at. But I knew that they were looking for stuff that would allow them to be able to grow and evolve over time. So they convinced me to actually go on Bigger Pockets. So I did Bigger Pockets podcast episode 109 and just gave out my personal phone number. And But that was before like Bigger Pockets was such a huge thing. And I was like, nobody will call about this. And then I had like 30 people hitting me up a day.
Wow, that's so cool.
Right. So I was like, all right, well, God's calling me to say, this is the way you're going to be in service to people. I know you already have the hit your financial goals, Scott, but here's what you're going to do to go help everybody else hit their financial goals. Is you're going to create the back end support that people need. So that's what I've done over the last 7 years now with Royal Legal Solutions. Now we have over 2,000 clients all over the country. I have a team of about 40 with 5 attorneys. And what we're working on, specializing in, is how to help the average real estate investor with everything they need to learn how to do besides the actual deal itself, right? So everything has to do with like the entity structuring and the estate planning and the CPA work with the tax strategies and filing those returns and the insurance and how do you find good new deals, right? The community that I've created and the team that I've created is designed to be education-based. And we think that we win by helping people get the most educated they possibly can be. So that way, when they're ready to move forward, which means I finally have enough education to be able to feel comfortable with whatever's being recommended to me, then they will. And so all we have to do is just educate people and help them get on the path to better education and better systems and processes so they can join in on what is the best practices to success and achieving financial freedom through real estate. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Sure. And I think it is a huge service. And the reason you got so many calls is because it's something in real estate and in life, really, it's you don't know what you don't know, and finding the people to surround yourself with that can help you figure that stuff out so that you can start to learn on it on your own is super important. And you opened a lot of people's eyes, it sounds like, to asset protection and the legal aspects of the real estate investing that a lot of people who are self-starters or come from nothing and are looking to get into that, they don't have any experience with this side of the house. I know I didn't. I think Melissa probably had a little bit more experience on that side than I did. Before we started the show, we talked about, hey, what's the number one most important thing for beginning to mid-level investors and what they should be paying attention to from this podcast. And you said asset protection was probably the number one thing. So I'd like to start out just defining what is asset protection. When we're talking asset protection, what is it that you're actually speaking about?
Yeah, what you want to do is not care about lawsuits. That's really what good asset protection means. I don't have to care if I get sued, right? Mm-hmm. And if I know I do get sued, then I'm going to lose little or nothing, right? The lawsuits are like one of the top 3 things, like up there with divorce, right? That are like what'll stress you out in life. Because in this country, especially if you own assets in your personal name, everything you own is at risk. If you get into a car accident that exceeds the limits of liability of your car insurance policy, or if you have like a tenant or one of like their guests that gets hurt on your property. I've seen horror stories, right? Where we'll have like grandma gets hurt. She falls on the staircase and it ends up being, she gets really hurt, right? And I've seen that story play out for people, and they lose their entire net worth because of it, because they had all of the properties in their personal name and it well exceeded the limits of liability of their insurance. I've also seen it where it didn't exceed the limits of liability of their insurance, but their insurance company said, you should have known that hazard existed. And because you should have known, we're going to say that that's gross negligence, which they can decide on their own, and they deny you coverage. Right. So with this, the reality situation is that we want insurance because it protects us against most things most of the time, but we don't trust them. We don't trust profit-seeking corporations.
Right.
To be able to all their, and like how do we maintain control and how do you get bulletproof is in the use of like LLCs or trusts, depending upon like what state you live in, to be able to take you from that 80-90% protected that you are from insurance and make you 100% protected. You want to be like wealthy people are, right? Wealthy people don't own stuff, right? They don't own those yachts. They don't own those cars. They have companies that own that. And when you sue somebody who's wealthy, they don't care because they don't own anything. You can't take anything from them, right? And what I'm recommending to people is saying, like, listen, there's an affordable way to be and operate just like wealthy people do, but at a level that's appropriate for you.
Sure.
You don't need a full-time CPA and CFO. You're not Scott Royal Smith. You're not at my level, right? And I've already built, and you don't need a full-time insurance adjuster. You don't need a full-time fund manager, an investment advisor, right? I've already built all of these for myself. And that's what my internal team is essentially all the things that I built for myself. And now I'm at a level and we're at a place as a company where we're continually now able to offer to extend my team, my investment opportunities now to the rest of the world. So that way everybody can work side by side with me in the same systems I use for myself and the same investments that I'm making for myself as well. As a way to help everybody level up there. But really, asset protection is number one. I mean, I had a friend of mine who lost over $3 million in real estate. That's actually what got me so keen on asset protection. He was really well insured. He was actually telling me, he's like, you don't need to worry about any of the asset protection stuff. A decent attorney can just pierce an LLC. Don't need to worry about that. Just get great insurance and you'll be fine. Until he actually ran into a breach of contract issue with a deal that he wanted to pull out of. And when they sued him, he went to his insurance company and said, we don't cover anything that has to do with anybody saying you lied to him from an email or a text message or a phone call. We also don't deal with anything that has to do with any agreements you made around breaches of contract or whatever the case may be from these real estate deals that you wanted to pull out of. So the insurance isn't going to cover you. He had all the assets in his personal name. He signed for the contract in his personal name. And so that cost him $3 million. And if he would have had just a single LLC in place, he would have lost zero. Yeah. Because he wouldn't have had anything for them to take. And that's the power of these structures. It's the way to make sure you don't hit a reset button, right? And that's the risk you're taking if you don't put asset protection in place. You're saying, I'm okay owning assets in my personal name and risking the fact that there could be a scenario that I have to hit a complete reset button.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, if I'm a beginning real estate investor, I'm going out looking to make my first deal. Maybe I haven't made any deals. Am I worried about getting an LLC at that point?
Yeah. So the question always comes right in the mind is, what's the best use of our money, right? So if we never got sued and nothing ever bad happened to us, we would never need LLCs or insurance. We would take every dollar we have and we'd plow it into more deals.
Right.
We can take that risk. If you take that risk, though, what you have to be okay with is what's the downside of that risk. And what I found in my experience has been that life is good when it keeps going up and to the right, which means I don't have big downturns in anything. I want things up and to the right. It's like an investment term, right? Everything's like increasing in quality. I don't need it to go super fast, but I need it to always keep getting better. And as long as life is always getting better, and maybe of course you're going to have some down like stuff in there too, but as long as it's not like hugely down, like I'm okay. Life is still going along. It's all still great. Like I'm still a positive mindset. I'm not worried. I'm sleeping well. Everything else is turning well for me. And that's why insurance and asset protection is so important, is because it allows you to continue to go up in the right. So where does that play out for like an early investor, right? I say every early investor should start with 2 companies, right? You can have no companies, right? But then you run this other risk. And I'll tell you a little bit about the risk and a little bit why to do 2 companies. First company you want to get is if you have no assets, right? You say, well, do I need an LLC in that case? And say, yeah, I think you do as a real estate investor. And the reason why is that once you form an LLC, that LLC starts to become seasoned, which means now it can get independent lines of equity and capital, right? It starts to develop its own credit score, right? So that in itself is an asset. It's an access to capital asset. So your LLC is protecting you and protecting your credit score, because if you don't have an LLC in place and they sue you personally, it bombs your credit score, which impacts your ability to what? Close on real estate, right? Or I establish one LLC, I get an extra credit line that I can mature, and I protect my credit score. So like to me, that's an investment, right? I get to ensure that my access to capital is expanding and protected. The second LLC I would call an asset holding company. And that asset holding company should hold all of my cash, my stocks, and my real estate. Anything I have that's of value, right? My beat up Honda Civic, maybe not, right? Who's gonna get me for that, right? Into it. So, and maybe like the week before they came to take it, like maybe it got stolen. I don't know. This world is a crazy world. Anything that can happen, with these beat up Honda Civics with the keys left in on by the side of the road. And I just you didn't get it, whatever.
Right.
So, but for everything I do have that is of value, then let's go ahead and put that inside of an asset holding company. So that way, if I'm ever in a lawsuit, I don't own any assets, so they can't get to anything that I own. If they sued me based upon a deal that I did or a contract that I did or an offer that I made on a piece of real estate or on a lease agreement that I had with a tenant, well, that all goes through my other company called my operating company, the first one that we talked about that doesn't own anything, but it does everything. And in that scenario, I just shut down that company and start up a new one, which is our worst case scenario.
Sure.
most all the time, if you have the proper asset protection in place, including anonymity as well as LLCs, then what happens is you can stop lawsuits before they start, because the business of the lawsuit doesn't make sense anymore. Because when they look to sue you, if it doesn't look like you own anything, if it looks like you're the dude from the Big Lebowski on paper in terms of your assets, right? And if it looks like they can't find any of your assets because you had to have them hidden behind these revocable grantor trusts or land trusts, and all the information is connected to a law firm, that all the access to that is protected by attorney-client privilege. Now what you find is lawsuits just don't happen. I only deal with like one lawsuit a month out of having that many clients that will come through my doors of structures we defend. And in almost all the cases, we're able to get them completely dropped. Not because of the facts, not because the client wasn't wrong in some way or could be wrong in some way, right? But it's just because of the structure itself makes the business of the lawsuit not make sense, and therefore they get dropped. And that's what my experience as a litigator and also being a real estate investor and having a team of all real estate investor professionals all on one roof. That's the kind of results we're looking for.
Sure, that makes sense. I guess my understanding of the holding company versus the operating company is a little bit different. If one of the properties that's owned by the holding company is the one at the center of the lawsuit, the handrail breaks, grandma falls down 6 flights of stairs and trashes her hips, and they go after who owns that asset, aren't all of the assets that are inside that holding company then vulnerable to the situation?
100%. Yeah. So if you have one LLC that has multiple assets inside of it, if there is a lawsuit directly against one of the properties, right, like we have here for the grandma example, right, then all of the assets of the LLC are at risk. Mm-hmm. So that's the first issue, right? And this is where the complication starts coming in. We're saying like, well, what if we wanted to make it where only that one property was at risk? So what we would need to do in that case is either do the old model or the new model. Yeah. The old model is we do individual LLCs, one for each property and all owned by a parent LLC. That's called a hub and spoke.
Yep. Model
of protection. And you can do that and have anonymity with the ownership of the LLCs and anonymity with the ownership of all of the assets by using revocable grantor trusts, like types of land trusts or anonymous trusts you can put in place, right? And using like Wyoming LLCs to be the parent company. Really typical to do it that way, right? The problem that you run into with that is it becomes really expensive to form and maintain all of those LLCs, all the bank accounts, all the different sets of books. If you had, 4 properties, that means you have at least 5 LLCs, right? You have like the parent company, then you have one LLC for each of the individual properties. And then you have at least like 4 to 5 trusts that are going to come in place too, to hold everything anonymously and to be able to accomplish the benefits we talked about. That's the old way. The new way is to use a series LLC. It's been around for about 20 years. You can establish it in 13 states, but there's only 4 good states to really establish it that has charging order protection, meaning like if I sue you, I can't get to your ownership interest of the LLC. Super important. That's why it matters where you form. So the best states to form the series LLC are going to be in Delaware, Texas, Nevada, and Wyoming. And of those 4 states, Wyoming is by far the most popular online because it's anonymous in year 1. Although if you don't form the Wyoming LLC to be owned by a trust as well, as I have some articles on royallegalsolutions.com about, then you're going to blow the anonymity in year 2. And that's what everybody's doing right now. You find online. They're just forming Wyoming LLCs. They're anonymous in year 1, but the public information reports come out in year 2 and all the anonymity just got blown that the client thought that they were buying. And so anyway, just something to keep an eye on out there as you're looking for who might be setting up these structures for you. But the best thing to do is using the series LLC, I think, is just to form it in Texas. Although I can form these LLCs anywhere, I choose Texas because Texas doesn't have any yearly fees. And it doesn't cost us anything more as we create new child series of the series LLC. So it's infinitely scalable. And the series LLC allows you to do exactly what the hub and spoke model did. I can create a parent entity called the parent series LLC, create that in Texas, and create as many children as it wants. Each child is called a child series of the series LLC. And each child series acts for liability purposes, just like an individual LLC. So we can compartmentalize every single asset underneath the series LLC. That gives us the protection that you were talking about of like grandma falling to the stairs. I mean, she can only get to that one asset. But the series LLC allows us to do everything with only one bank account one EIN number, and one set of accounting books, as long as we tag or classify the income and expenses for each individual property, which you're going to be doing anyway because you're a good real estate investor and you really need to know what your ROIs are for that property, right? Sure. So you're already doing all of that work anyway, but using a series LLC, you only have to form and maintain one entity in this case instead of 5, right? And you still get all the anonymity benefits and all the protection benefits that you would get doing it the old way. It's literally just the more efficient way of forming a bunch of LLCs that get an infinitely scalable system that doesn't cost you anything more as you scale.
Sure. And would you want to own that Texas LLC with one of the other, like through the trust or that kind of thing? Is that what you're saying to do?
Yeah. So typically what we do is we have 2 different layers of trust. We have one layer of trust where the series LLC is owned by a trust. And then that keeps the LLC ownership anonymous, because the only thing that relates back when they say who owns this LLC is they see it's the name of anonymous trust, and it ties back to an attorney and a law firm. So then it's all protected by the attorney-client privilege. They can't ask me about it and I can't share about it. Who actually owns this LLC, sure. Right? Same thing happens on the individual property level. We hold each individual property in the name of a land trust. So if it's the property is at 123 Main Street, we create a land trust called the 123 Main Street Trust. That trust is in turn owned by child Series A of your Series LLC. So it's compartmentalized. And now it's compartmentalized and held anonymously, right, through that land trust. And there's no extra tax returns or bank accounts or anything you have to do for having that type of structure in place. It runs passively in the background. The land trusts are fantastic to use, not just for anonymity, but they also avoid the due on sale clause of your mortgage, right? So when you transfer the asset and you finance it in your personal name, because that's how you're going to get the best financing rates, especially for your first 10 properties, then you transfer it over into the land trust and child series after a purchase or a refinancing, right? Because you're going to want to do all those in your personal name because that's how you get the best loan rates. But you don't have to worry about the mortgage being called due, right? The due on sale clause per the St. Germain Act is not enforceable if it's a transfer to a trust. Sure. So we're able to then get the best financing. I also recommend that if you're doing that, you should probably also use a warranty deed, because then it's going to preserve your title insurance in place. And a lot of people ask me, say, well, isn't my name going to be on the chain of title as a prior owner? So isn't my anonymity blown when I transfer it into the anonymous land trust? So yeah, you're a previous owner on the chain of title. We structure it so it looks like a sale into a trust. It's now with your name's not listed onto it. There's this other guy, Scott Royal Smith, that's listed on it. And what if they guess that maybe Bob is still the owner of the property? I say, great. What are they going to do then, Bob? Well, they're going to sue me. Great. And what are they going to get? Nothing. Because you don't actually own the asset anymore. Sure. The land trust and child series of your series LLC owns the asset. So they just wasted $5,000 to $10,000 suing the wrong party. And isn't that what we wanted? We want them wasting time and money on their pursuit to get you, because that's how you win war, is you get people to waste their time and money.
Sure. And then how does that work? Okay. So me and Melissa are partners in our business, and we have it set up under this land trust and series LLC. I go out, I'm, drinking and driving with no pants on, and I smash into a bus stop, kill a bunch of people, and they sue me personally. And then they submit a discovery and request for production. They ask me what assets I own, and then I have to respond back to that, or have a lawyer do it. But anyways, they're asking me to give all my bank accounts, give all my property owned and stuff like that. You just don't tell them, or how does that part of it work?
Right. So we have to talk about a little bit about at what stages is what protection effective, right? So at the very beginning stages, right, of the inquiry, say we had everything set up, right, and a series LLC that you and your partner own. Yeah. So you say, great. Now you don't have any assets anymore. So when you crashed into the bus, right, your insurance will immediately step in to try to protect you, right? Maybe they'll say drinking and driving or pants off made it gross negligence, Should have known that was going to cause an accident driving with your pants off. Happens all the time. I don't know, right? You never know what these people are going to claim anyway. So we'll say, great. So now your insurance isn't going to protect you. And so now all the parents of those kids are going to say, great, well, we actually want to sue you because of what happened with the bus, right? So then they'll say, great, should we sue this guy? So they then go to the attorney and say, great, if we sue him and we spend all this money suing him, because either they're going to have to pay out of pocket or they have to pay an attorney a contingency fee, right? What can we do, right? And then the attorney's going to look at that, because this is what we attorneys do when we're looking to sue somebody. is we immediately hire a private investigator and start to use our tools to be able to find out what's the extent of the assets.
Sure.
What businesses do they own? What assets do they own? What can we find out about that? What they're going to see when they do that is that you don't own any assets, right? Everything is hidden behind the structures, right? So at the very beginning of the lawsuit, they're making an equation on saying, if we proceed with a lawsuit, we will likely have a $0 recovery. How much are we willing to risk in attorney's fees and time to be able to have a $0 recovery off of it? And the answer there is, that's where the lawsuit gets dropped. Yeah. It's because it says now the business equation doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, let's say they proceed with it anyway, because some of the people are really pissed. Then what's going to happen? Now they go through the lawsuit, and now they're incurring a $25,000 to $50,000 expense to be able, in your case, maybe even more, right? Because that's a really messy issue, probably going to be hugely expensive. So now they're racking up attorney's bills as they're going through for this $0 recovery. And usually after about $10,000 to $15,000 on their way to 50, that's where everybody starts getting really reasonable as they start realizing, like, well, my case isn't as good as I thought. And by the way, I'm really tired of cutting checks, right? That come into this. Especially if I don't think I'm going to get anything back. My vindictive nature and my anger has kind of quelled down, as well as cutting checks have a tendency to do to people in litigation once they start cutting those 5-figure checks every month out to the attorneys. So what happens is at that point is you'll either end up getting a low dollar settlement, or they go ahead and proceed with the lawsuit, and they get all the way to the end of that lawsuit. And let's say that they win, and they now win a money judgment off of you, right? And then I said, great, now we've won this money judgment. Now we can go do another expensive proceeding called post-judgment recovery. Now they get to serve you with depositions about telling us what the beneficial interests are that you have in trusts or companies. And that's when you have to disclose, hey, I have these beneficial interests that are over here. And you know what happens at that point? They have a judgment, and they can't actually get to any of the assets because you don't actually own any of the assets anymore. The only time they can get paid, two things have to happen. One, you have to take money out of the LLC and get it into your personal name. Two, they have to find out about it and get a court order to freeze the bank accounts before you're able to move the money or withdraw it. So it's a dang near impossible to be able to collect on money judgments under the scenario that you have when we have all the protections in place that we've had, because it becomes so laborious, so expensive, so unsure about ever being able to get a payday off of it. That you find that they realize that in the front end, and that's why we've had such huge success in being able to stop it. Now, if you're like, even in that scenario, I want to make sure that I don't lose money into it, Scott, because I'm still afraid, right, about like what could happen. If you wanted to cover off on even more risk, what you would do is set up like a Nevis or Cook Islands LLC or trust, and then have your ownership interest in all of your LLCs transfer to that trust. So you could still take payments out. It's outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, so they can't touch the money. Typically, it starts to make sense for people that are at like the 5 million plus net worth range, but entirely possible. What I tell people is anything is achievable if you're willing to spend enough money, right, onto it. But the question that always is critical and essential is, what is the right amount of money? What is the right thing to do that's appropriate? Not the absolutes, right? Because we should understand that this world is not about absolutes. Right. Absolutes become very expensive, right? What's that 90, 95, 99%? And what's a really efficient, easy way that we can do that to have a repeatable basis over and over and over again that's worked for thousands of investors? That's what we've dialed in over the course of the last 7 years, is how does that need to work on asset protection, and how does it have to relate to your tax estate planning, your insurance, and your investments?
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You got a
long answer? Was that a monologue from the professor?
No, it was great, and it was exactly the answer to my question. So, what I'm hearing and what you're saying is, based off of where you're at in your career, how much you have to lose versus how much you have to gain, you need to make the decision: is it worth it to put everything into that and go this route? Knowing that if you're going to make real estate a career, there is a chance and a high probability that you will come into some sort of
it's almost guaranteed. You're almost, if you're in this business for long enough, you're going to get sued by a tenant, somebody you sell a property to. I've just been around. I've had enough investors who's like, okay, cool. Over a track record, you're going to end up in these lawsuits, right? The only question is, what kind of position are you going to be in?
Sure.
Are you going to be in a powerful position, or are you going to be in a vulnerable position? Because if you're in a powerful position, you don't worry about the lawsuit. It doesn't cost you much time or money because you already spent the money to protect yourself from the lawsuit. And if you're not going to do it, you're in a vulnerable position and you're living off of hopium, that I'm going to hope that everything is going to be fine. Right. I do it. And I got to tell you, as real estate investors, you're in the worst possible scenario if you're owning property in your personal name. Why? Because litigation attorneys will find your stuff immediately. And guess what? You can't shelter a piece of real estate offshore, right? They will seize it, and they'll put a lis pendens onto your property. They'll make it where you can't sell it or transfer or get mortgage or any type of financing, additional financing on it, and they lock you up. And if you're a flipper, that's horrible, because if you're doing everything through a single LLC and you have all of your houses in a single LLC and you sell one of them, they say you defrauded me for some reason about the plumbing. The actual case of defended was around emails regarding plumbing in a house that was sold. We got it dropped because of the use of the series LLC, made it where the business sense of the lawsuit didn't make sense for them anymore. But I've seen it where flippers get sued for one house that they sold, and now they got 7 houses that are inside of one LLC. They all have a lis pendens on them, so they're all clouded on title because they're all now quote unquote subject to the lawsuit. So they can't sell the houses because nobody wants to buy a house that's subject to a lawsuit. And guess what? They end up paying through the nose on the lawsuit, because essentially they're faced with the decision of either I pay out this extortionist, right? Or my entire business crumbles because I can't move the assets and the debt servicing is killing me, right? About being able to hold on to it. And guess what? The litigation attorney knows that, right? Going into it, because they're able to sniff all that up because you haven't hidden anything. You've given them all the information they need to know how to leverage against you. So I'm saying, let's remove that off the table. Don't allow people to have leverage over you.
Well, I think that's amazing. I think that there's way more that we can go into that probably the scope of which it is relevant, but time constraints aren't going to let us get into that. So I'm hoping you could tell people a little bit about your one-stop shop offer and how that applies to them and why it's relevant to the high-level investors and also the beginning investors. And we can kind of educate them on that and then tell them how to get in contact with you and if they want to find out more.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one-stop shop concept is like the Royal concept, right? So we have divisions inside of Royal Legal Solutions that are all in-house, right? So we try as little as possible to ever refer anybody out of house. My goal was to create efficiencies by having all of the professionals located underneath one roof that work together every day, right? So that's what we've done. So we have that on the asset protection side with a team of 5 attorneys, large team of paralegals, a full team of about 40 people. Into there. We also have an in-house CPA, MBA, CFO. Also with Royal Insurance, we also have 63 direct lines to carriers for every type of insurance you could look for. So we're able to beat everybody on what the insurance rates are. They're able to get everywhere else because of those direct connections and because of the holistic nature of what we're able to do inside of the Royal sphere. And then we also have investment funds as well as investment brokering of different deals that I'm able to have access to because at my investor level that we will then introduce to the community on a weekly basis to be able to help people find what those new deals are going to be, right? That are going to be appropriate for them. They can band together on if they don't have enough money on their own. Investors are always pairing with each other to get into deals that they need a higher buy-in to be able to get into, which can be the case, especially for beginning investors, right? So what we've done is said, great, the way we can help you is if you go to royallegalsolutions.com and you click on the get a price in the top of that webpage and fill out that quiz. It's about 20 questions long. That quiz actually tells us all of the relevant information that we need to have an initial conversation about you, where you're at in the journey, what types of investments you're making, et cetera, right? That tells us out of the thousands of hours of videos and articles and 11 ebooks that I have, what are going to be the few that are going to be really important to where you're at right now. And that's what that quiz will tell us is, hey, this is a free way we can give you the most targeted information that's helpful for people just like you that we've had in the past from working with so many investors. Then what we'll be able to do is to be able to say, great, if this makes sense and you're liking the education, you're liking the 3 times a week coaching calls that we offer free, there's no obligation to go to those, but you can on tax, on asset protection, as well as the investments offerings that we have. Then it might make sense to pay $149 is what I think it's offered for right now. Can't guarantee by the time you listen to this that the price hasn't gone up, but for right now, that's what it is. And for that $149, we will also take you through a series of professional meetings. One professional meeting on just your asset protection and estate planning, another one through your tax, another one for your insurance, another one through your investment portfolio to help make sure that you have a professional oversight at least once through every major area of your life. And since we only work with real estate investors, that means that everything that we look at is geared exactly for what real estate investors need, right? So it's not all sales meetings. They're education. You're going to have homework in between the meetings to learn. The meeting that we have is to be able to see how the theory that you learned about applies to your direct situation. And then what are the avenues that are available for you there, given your budget? What's appropriate for you on your objectives? And then what can you afford, right? Because you might have, I'm going to scale to 100 houses. And I'm like, well, you're scaling yourself right into just an insurance policy because you can't afford an LLC right now, So let's start there, right? And then let's work our way up as we're able to look at over time, because if you're trying to figure out two nickels to rub together, you probably don't need to be spending $7,000 to $10,000 on entities, right? You need to be focused on other stuff, right? And so that's the purpose of those meetings, is because that's the number one thing, right? Everybody's worried about how do I make sure that everybody in my life has real estate investing experience and is geared towards real estate investors. Really difficult to find. Even if you can find those people in your life, then how do you get them to talk to each other? And that leaves you having to quarterback all of the information. And what we've done is said, well, we'll just remove those problems off the table, right? And we'll make it super affordable for everybody to have all the information so that they can know whether they're going to do it on their own or whether they want to hire us to do it or they want to farm it out to whoever, their local attorney or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. My game is won by how many people I help, not by profit anymore. So great. That's our offer. Go ahead and we'll take you through the meetings and we'll get you all the education and you'll know exactly what you need to do, what your options are. And then it's up to you to decide who do you want to partner with now that you're armed with the best intelligence.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And if they want to connect with you on social media or you want to give your phone number out.
Yeah, the best thing to do really is just go to royallegalsolutions.com and get a price at the top. Because honestly, there's not a whole lot me or my team can do until you fill out a quiz. Sure. Because it's too much. Right? To try to help the people at scale for $0 to say, great, I have thousands of hours of videos. We don't have an hour to talk to you about whatever's going on to be able to get those answers, right? It's like, no. You show us a little bit of you doing some work here and filling out the quiz, and then we'll do our part for free next, which is making all of the educational recommendations. So that way you can then decide on, hey, do I want to make a monetary investment in the additional support and getting that one-on-one support on every major area of my life. So it's just royallegalsolutions.com. Click on the get a price at the top of the page and fill out the quiz.
Awesome, Scott. That was super informative. That is definitely the deepest legal and asset protection conversation that we've had. And I think that it's applicable to just about everybody that's in this business. Actually, it is applicable to everybody in this business. So we do appreciate your time. There's a lot of great information. I don't know.
We're going to be doing it.
Yeah, we're going to be doing it. We need to stay. That spoken wheel thing is hurting the bank. So.
Oh man. Yeah, that stuff gets expensive. By the way, too, last point on that too, is a lot of people that I know that flip, that you reuse the same LLC from one flip to the other. So then they have all these skeletons in the closet of everything they've ever done in the past that could come back to bite them at any time. So using that series LLC, you just remove all the skeletons, because after you use it once, you never use it again.
Yeah, that's
super. If you're a flipper, it's just so much more cost efficient and effective to do it that way. So hope you guys come to the website, click on get a price, fill out the quiz, and love to have you hook up with Scott.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Jam. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, check out our website, therealestatejam.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Real Estate Jam. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at therealestatejam@gmail.com. See you next episode.